So frustrating. No pets allowed, no pets accepted, pets not allowed. It's the struggle for any pet lover looking for a flat or apartment in the UK, finding a place that lets you bring your four-legged pooch. Though I consider the UK to be one of the most dog-friendly countries on the planet, it still has a long way to go when it comes to being a place where pet owners can rent or even own a flat that allows their best friends to live under the same roof. If you're a pet owner with a dog, cat, or even a smaller pet, then chances are you've probably spent a long time looking for a place to live. I can tell you from experience that it isn't easy, but I'm sure you already know that. Landlords can be quite rigid in their approach when it comes to even talking about having a pet in the flat. It's like an automatic no. So what do some pet owners do? Well, some of them have to end up sneaking in their pets, which can be a stressful way to live. And others, in worst case scenarios, end up having to give their pets away or go homeless. But fear not, because I, Danny the Traveler, along with my hardworking friend here, Rocky the Traveler, are here to help you realize that while it is difficult to find a dog-friendly flat, it is not impossible. If you think about it, it doesn't quite make sense that the UK is a country in which you can let dogs in cafes, pubs, restaurants, bars, even some shops and stores, and even bookmakers let you bring dogs into their establishment. So why not flats? Throughout my time in the UK, I've spent months trying to find a flat that would allow me to have Rocky. I went down your typical home and flat search route and browsed through properties on the usual sites such as Zoopla, Rightmove, etc. But I was always hit with the same thing: no pets allowed. So what is it that landlords have against dogs? Did you know that you can even own your own flat in the UK and you still not be able to bring a dog inside your own flat? That's pretty crazy. So going back to the rental thing, I've noticed that if a listing does say pets allowed, it's usually a house. But not everyone, especially in the south of England, can really afford to live in a big house with a garden yet. It's almost as if landlords think you can only have a pet if you own or rent a house. This is ridiculous. Clearly everyone in the world has a different living situation, and many of their pets would do absolutely fine living in a place other than a big house. If you look at countries such as France and Spain, there are tons of pets of all shapes and all sizes living happy lives in city apartments. Their owners just take them out more frequently and they're all happy. With all that said, I definitely think there should be a rethink about pet policies, especially if the pet is well behaved. If you've ever been flat hunting with a pet, then no doubt you've seen those words many times. I probably combed through hundreds of ads myself, and I've seen this more times than I can count. Now, as I've said before, the UK is very pet friendly overall. In fact, most of my content is based on our travels and adventures in the UK, and we show people how pet friendly it is over here. So earlier this year, I found it quite ironic that I struggled excessively in finding a suitable flat for me and Rocky in this country. Maybe you can relate. So while I firmly believe that the world is becoming more pet friendly, I'm not so sure that landlords are becoming more flexible when it comes to letting with pets. It's something that I hope changes in the future, but until then, here are some tips in helping you find pet-friendly accommodation. So in the 4 or 5 years that I've lived in this country now, I've stayed in a few different cities, and each time I moved to one of those new cities, it took us a long time to find pet-friendly accommodation. I was pretty fortunate that every city that I moved to, I ended up finding either a pet-friendly flat or I shared a house with somebody who loves dogs. But for every yes that I received, there were dozens and dozens of no's. Of course, being patient is easier said than done. I spent hours and hours looking for accommodation that said pets allowed. But being persistent goes a long way, and soon enough you'll find a flat that is suitable for you and your pets. And while I talk about patience, and again I know that this is easier said than done, but make sure that you never end up in a desperate situation. You always want to have more than just 1 or 2 options to move into. And of course, you know what's best for you and your dog. So keep those standards for yourselves when you move into a new place. So you want that spacious flat right in the middle of the city next to all the shops and the stores that's also pet friendly? Well, to that I say, good luck. While it's entirely possible that you could find that, you may have to settle for a place a bit outside of the city. If you are willing to be flexible for your dog's sake, then you can find a pretty awesome place that you may never know you wanted. Now, in terms of flexibility, I am also talking about finances. It definitely helps to have a little bit more money saved up in case a landlord agrees to a pet but requires a higher deposit. Also, be ready to possibly pay a bit more per month if need be, in order to have a place for you and your dog. I know it's hard to hear that you have to pay more, but sadly, nowadays, that's the case. We know dogs can be a little stubborn at times, especially this little guy. But stubbornness can be good sometimes. What do I mean by this? I mean that even if a listing says no pets allowed, try ringing the landlord or letting agency anyway. So then you ask and call the flat or house you're interested in, and even if it says no pets allowed, you never know. They might like the sound of your voice, or they might feel generous. You can talk up your pet and let them know that it's the best pet on the planet, which, let's face it, all of them are. And maybe the letting agent might talk to the landlord, and you never know. If you come across an ad and it says pets considered, then it certainly helps if you can paint a verbal picture to your landlord or letting agency about how well behaved your dog is. If your pet is house trained and overall well behaved, then you should definitely consider writing a small resume or CV about your dog, and it can only help sway things in your favor. Also, a good idea is to offer your landlord or your letting agent the chance to meet up with your dog to assuage any fears that they may have about letting the property with your pet. Yes, online pet-friendly letting agents are a thing. For example, the website Let's With Pets is very handy in helping tenants find pet-friendly properties all around the UK. This site, for example, does private renting rather than having to go through letting agents. But there are pet-friendly letting agents out there. I would consider, for example, Zoopla, which has a pet filter. Others include Open Rent and the flat sharing website Spare Room. I've successfully used Spare Room quite a few times to find pet-friendly accommodation in the UK. Now, speaking of shared accommodation, I personally like my space, and I like to be able to come home and cook a meal for me and Rocky and not have to worry about anyone else hogging up the kitchen. But sometimes a little bit of flexibility is needed. Maybe this whole sharing section should have been shared in the flexibility section. Oh well. Anyway, sharing a big house or a big flat might make it easier for a landlord to accept pets, especially if the accommodation has a garden. This could mean housemates, friends, or your parents or family. I have heard that if you're interested in a flat and you introduce yourself to the letting agency or the landlord, and then you tell them about your pet, that they might be a little bit more receptive to allowing a pet in the property. And that's because they've gotten to know you a little bit, and perhaps they can tell that you're a responsible person or a trustworthy person. Again, this is what I've heard. I haven't tried it myself. Another tip is to always read tenant contracts once you're ready to move in, especially when it comes to pets. If a landlord does indeed agree to a pet, then make sure you get that in writing, including all the terms. As a tenant, you should know your rights, and if you ever have any doubt about anything, then contact someone who specializes in legal property matters. And one of the last tips, but certainly not the least, never give up on your pet, and especially never give up your pet. They are your friends, or in some cases family, and abandoning them just because you didn't have the patience to find a pet-friendly accommodation is not fair to them, especially if they've known you for quite a while now. I say you owe it to them to give it your absolute best shot in trying to find pet-friendly accommodation. Whether that means having to share or move back in with your parents or family for the time being, There's always possibilities out there. And I know it can be hard, but in the end, it's absolutely worth it. Now, a small note on other countries, since I've mostly talked about pet-friendly flat hunting in the UK. I've also myself lived in the US and Spain with Rocky. In the US, since many apartments are purpose-built, you can find out right away whether a complex is pet-friendly or not in the description of said apartment complex. So that's quite easy, and because the country is massive, you'll have loads of options. In Europe, many of the flat hunting sites have pet filters. In my short time living in Spain, I was genuinely and happily surprised at the amount of pet-friendly accommodations. Obviously, once you click on the Show Pet-Friendly Flats Only option, then your choices narrow down. Try sites such as Idealista, which allow you to filter out homes that are not pet-friendly. Well, it took us about 2 months to find pet-friendly accommodation here in the south of England, but we finally did it. I hope these tips have helped you, and remember, above all, have patience. If you have any questions on pet-friendly flat hunting in the UK or even in Europe, let us know and we'll be happy to help you guys. And again, trust me, we've been through the struggle and we know it's hard. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing, and also hit that bell notification icon to keep up to date with the latest pet travel tips, bull terrier fun, and our travels around Europe. And we'll see you guys on the next adventure.